Nearly half of all Americans, 48% of women, 49% of men, will experience psychological aggression from an intimate partner at some point in their lives. Nearly half. And most of them won't call it abuse, they'll call it love. That's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. We think manipulation looks like a villain, someone cold, obviously cruel, easy to spot from across the room. But the research tells a completely different story. The most effective manipulation doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like the most intense, consuming, passionate love you've ever experienced. And that's not an accident. That's the design. So if you've ever looked back at a relationship and thought, why didn't I leave sooner? Why couldn't I see it? This video is for you. Because it wasn't weakness. It wasn't stupidity. Your brain was working exactly as it was built to work, and someone knew how to exploit that. What you didn't have was the language for what was happening to you. That's what we're going to fix right now. There are 7 things a manipulative person does that feel, in the moment, like genuine love. And I want to walk through all of them, not to scare you away from relationships, not to make you see danger in every kind gesture, but to make you literate. Because once you can name these, they lose most of their power. Let's start with the one that almost nobody sees coming. Love bombing. You've probably heard the term. But knowing the word and understanding what it actually does to your brain are 2 very different things. Love bombing is when someone floods you, overwhelms you with affection right at the beginning of a relationship. Constant texts throughout the day, surprise gifts, long, deeply personal conversations that go until 2 in the morning, declarations that you're their soulmate, their person, the one they've been waiting for. And all of this happens within the first few weeks. From the inside, it feels extraordinary. It feels like finally being truly seen by someone. Most people describe it as the most intense romantic connection they've ever felt. And here's why. Because neurologically, it kind of is. That flood of attention triggers a dopamine and oxytocin surge that your brain hasn't experienced at that level before. You're not falling in love. You're being chemically accelerated past the stage where your judgment normally kicks in. The intensity isn't a sign of depth. It's the speed that makes it dangerous. You don't get the slower months where you'd normally notice inconsistencies, see how they treat strangers, watch how they handle stress. All of that gets bypassed. And by the time the love bombing stops, and it always stops, you're already attached to a version of this person that was specifically performed to hook you. Here's the thing about love bombing that most people miss. It's not just about making you feel good. It's about creating a standard, a baseline, so that when the warmth eventually gets pulled back, you spend the rest of the relationship chasing the feeling you had at the beginning. That chase is where the control lives. The second tactic follows directly from the first, and it's called future faking. While love bombing floods your present, future faking colonizes your future. It's when someone makes elaborate, specific promises about a life you'll build together. We're going to move to Colorado. I want you to meet my parents next month. You'd be such an incredible parent to our kids. And none of it is ever real. Not a plan. Bait. Future faking works because it gets you to invest emotionally in something that doesn't exist yet. You start making decisions. Who you spend your time with, what opportunities you turn down, how much you're willing to tolerate, based on a future that was never going to happen. The promises feel like evidence of commitment. They feel like someone who thinks long-term, who sees a future with you, who is serious. That's exactly what they're designed to feel like. But commitment requires follow-through. Promises without action, repeated over time, aren't love. They're a leash. Now, here's where it gets psychologically brutal. Because once the love bombing slows down and the future promises keep not materializing, most people don't leave. They go deeper. And the reason comes down to one of the most important concepts in understanding these relationships: intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is what happens when rewards are given unpredictably. Not consistently, not never. Unpredictably. Warmth, then withdrawal. Affection, then coldness. A perfect weekend, then 3 days of silence. And the research on this is stark. Psychologists Dutton and Painter studied 75 women who had recently left abusive relationships and found that the intermittent reinforcement pattern, the cycling between cruelty and affection, actually strengthened the emotional bond rather than breaking it. The unpredictability was the hook, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Your brain is wired to work harder for uncertain rewards than for guaranteed ones. It's the same neurological mechanism behind slot machine addiction. The dopamine spike you get from a random win is higher than the spike from a predictable one. So the good moments in a relationship built on intermittent reinforcement don't just feel good, they feel intoxicating because you've been waiting. Because you've been wondering if they'd ever come back. That cycle gets mistaken for passion. It gets mistaken for the kind of love that isn't boring, that keeps you on your toes. Not passion. A trauma bond forming in real time. The fourth tactic is the one that does the deepest damage, and it's called gaslighting. Gaslighting is when someone consistently causes you to doubt your own perception of reality. That never happened. You're being way too sensitive. You're remembering it wrong. I never said that. You always do this. It starts small. A comment here, a correction there. But over time, it adds up to something serious. You stop trusting yourself, your own memory, your own emotional responses, your own read on situations. All of it starts to feel unreliable. Research published in Psychology Today in late 2024 found that people who have been in psychologically abusive relationships show higher levels of cognitive dissonance than other traumatized populations. And the reason makes complete sense once you understand what's happening. Abusers don't abuse constantly. They mix the cruelty with genuine affection, which creates two contradictory sets of memories about the same person. Your brain is holding "he loves me deeply" and "he made me feel crazy" at the exact same time. That tension is extraordinarily hard to resolve, and the easiest resolution, the one that feels most survivable, is to dismiss the cruelty and hold on to the love. Gaslighting is particularly sinister because it presents itself as concern. I'm just worried about how emotional you get. I just want you to be more rational. Sounds like someone who cares about your well-being, while it's actually dismantling your ability to ever trust your own instincts again. The fifth tactic is one of the sneakiest ones on this list. It's called the pity play, or false vulnerability. Someone shares what appears to be genuine pain, trauma, or weakness, but strategically and with a specific outcome in mind. The abusive childhood they mention every time you try to set a boundary. The ex who destroyed them that they bring up whenever you seem distant. The health scare they share right when you're about to leave. All of it triggers your protective instincts. You feel responsible for their pain. You feel like leaving would make you the villain in their story. Vulnerable narcissists, what psychologists call covert narcissists, are particularly skilled at this tactic. And research consistently shows they specifically target the most empathetic, compassionate, non-judgmental people. If you've been drawn into these dynamics more than once, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because something is right about you, your capacity to care, and someone learned to weaponize it. The intimacy of these emotional disclosures feels real. It feels like they're letting you in. But genuine vulnerability isn't used as leverage. Genuine vulnerability doesn't surface precisely when you're about to pull away. The sixth tactic is harder to spot because it usually sounds romantic, at least at first. Isolation, but isolation disguised as devotion. I just want you all to myself. I don't really like your friend Sarah. She's not good for you. Why do you need to spend so much time with your family when you could be with me? Wrapped in possessiveness that gets framed as love. And early on, it can genuinely feel flattering. Someone who wants you that much, who prioritizes your time together that fiercely. But notice what's actually happening. Over months, your circle shrinks. The friendships that weren't actively encouraged drift. The family relationships that got questioned slowly cool. And at some point, you look up and the only person in your corner is the person who created the problem in the first place. Not an accident. An isolated person has no external reference point for what normal looks like. No one to say, hey, that sounds off. No safe place to land if they leave. Cutting off your support system isn't devotion. It's infrastructure for control. The seventh tactic is the one that hits the hardest for people who care deeply, who have strong values, who genuinely try to be good. Guilt is currency. After everything I've done for you, I gave up so much for this relationship. If you actually loved me, you wouldn't do that. Sounds like accountability. Sounds like someone expressing hurt, but there's a critical difference between expressing pain and using pain as a tool to manage behavior. Researchers at Frontiers in Psychology published a 2025 study on what they called love addiction. The belief that love inherently requires sacrifice, suffering, and self-erasure. And they found that people who hold that belief are significantly more likely to tolerate gaslighting and emotional manipulation because it fits their existing model of what love looks like. If you were taught that love means giving until it hurts, guilt becomes the most effective weapon someone can use against you, because you already believe that discomfort is proof of love. So when they make you feel guilty, it registers as intimacy. When you bend yourself to relieve their expressed pain, it feels like loyalty. Not loyalty. Your conscience being used against you by someone who studied exactly where your soft spots are. Here's the thing that ties all 7 of these together. None of them look like what we imagine manipulation to look like. No mustache twirling, no obvious cruelty at the start. These tactics are specifically engineered to mimic the early stages of falling in love. The intensity, the vulnerability, the feeling of being chosen, the sense that this person sees you more clearly than anyone ever has. Your brain genuinely cannot distinguish between manufactured chemistry and the real thing when it's happening. The neurological response is identical. That's why smart, self-aware, educated people end up in these relationships. Roughly 10 to 20% of the general population shows elevated dark triad traits at subclinical levels. These people are everywhere, and most of them look nothing like what you'd expect. Knowing this doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you calibrated. Because here's what real love actually looks like when you hold it up against all 7 of these. Real love doesn't need to rush. It doesn't need to flood you before your discernment catches up. Real love makes promises, and then takes steps toward them. It doesn't use a future as bait. Real love is consistent. It doesn't punish you with silence and then reward you with warmth and call that passion. Real love doesn't require you to doubt your own memory. Real love doesn't appear precisely when you're about to set a limit or walk away. Real love makes your world bigger. It doesn't slowly close every door until the only one left is theirs. And real love doesn't charge you for its affection. It doesn't present its sacrifices as a debt you owe. The goal isn't to be suspicious of everyone who's kind to you. The goal is to know what you're looking for, because once you can name these patterns, they become visible. And visible things are survivable in a way that unnamed things simply are not. If you watched this and recognized something you went through, maybe one of these, maybe several, the fact that it took you time to see it is not a failure. The most empathetic people are the most targeted. Full stop. Your capacity to care was real. The love you gave was real. What was done with it, that's on them. So tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced one of these and mistaken it for love? Which one was the hardest to name, and what finally helped you see it clearly? I genuinely want to hear it. The comments on these videos are where some of the most honest conversations happen, and someone scrolling through right now might need to read exactly what you have to say. If this video gave you a name, a framework, a moment of recognition, share it. Send it to someone who might need it. Hit like, because it genuinely helps more people find this content. And subscribe if you're not already, because next week we're going into something that connects directly to everything we talked about today. How to rebuild trust in your own instincts after a relationship like this has shaken them. That one is going to matter. You already knew something was wrong, now you have the words for it. That's where it starts.